Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Austin Price, Jesse Simonton, and Rob Lewis. I'm Brett Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday. College football season is officially over with the national championship game last night. We'll talk some about that. We'll talk some more about just kind of the year in general, a little bit of update on everything going on with Tennessee as coaches can go back out on the road the end of this week, and we'll talk some hoops as well. But let's first dive into just general impressions and thoughts on what you watched last night and what felt like the longest football game in the history of mankind. What's your takeaway from the championship game? Anybody?
I mean, we probably just witnessed the greatest quarterback season in the history of college football. I mean, Joe Burrow, LSU had thrown 60 touchdowns combined in the previous 4 years, and Burrow did it in one season. I mean, that's a pretty dramatic stat for him to make the leap where, you know, I think you could have made an argument going into this season that guys like JG and Felipe Franks were maybe better than him a year ago. For him to ascend and emerge, I mean, it was remarkable. And I think the best team, the team that was the best team all season won. I mean, there was that other stat that came out that all those teams, you know, that Oklahoma or that LSU beat, you know, only lost to one or no other teams the rest of the season. They beat, I think, top five teams this year. It's just, they were dominant from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, to close your season, beating Georgia, Oklahoma, and then Clemson, I mean, remarkable. Burrow
by double digits each one, and other than being down 10-0 to start last night, they did not have to sweat that much, you know, after that offense got humming.
Yeah, Burrow was awesome. I mean, you know, 60 touchdowns. I mean, you know, you and I were talking about before we started the podcast, Hubbs. I mean, Peyton threw, 88 in his career at Tennessee? And he threw 60 in 1 year. I mean, it's just how the game has changed. Like you know, and if you get the right trigger guy and you have the right set of receivers, it's almost like playing arena football. I mean, and that goes at the NFL level, at college. I mean, he's got some just dudes he's throwing to. Hilaire's shifty little, you know, dynamo who's extremely tough to tackle with his low center of gravity. And then their defense does just enough. It's not the prototypical LSU defense, but they still got some really talented guys over there.
Rob, you covered Ed Orgeron when he was here for a year. I'm not knocking Ed Orgeron and with the, you know, characterizing that he's some kind of cartoon character or anything, but seeing him work for a year here, how impressed, surprised, whatever are you with the fact that he's a national champion?
I'm super impressed, and I always thought that he was smarter than, you know, once we got to know him. I mean, it was apparent that he was sharper than, you know, as you say, the kind of cartoon character image made him look. I'm really happy for him. I enjoyed dealing with him, and I can remember him making time for me on a Sunday afternoon shortly after they got hired and doing a one-on-one interview in his office for, you know, like 30 minutes and just telling stories. I mean, I really enjoyed him, and I give him a lot of credit, man, for, you know, going back to the drawing board and just changing everything about their offense. I mean, just, you know, kind of turning all that over, and, you know, I think he's, you know, the accent, the bravado, all that. I mean, I think people have a faulty impression of exactly what all he's got going on upstairs. Sharp guy.
Yeah, you got Ed Orgeron, who was an assistant at Tennessee for a year. James Craig's the offensive line coach. He was here for a year as a Tennessee assistant. Tommy Moffitt has been their strength coach. My lasting impression of Ed Orgeron will be him calling me at that Italian restaurant when I was on a weekend getaway with my wife to wrap up the season.
And you were at Fazoli's?
No, we were not at Fazoli's. we were in Gatlinburg at the best little deal, whatever, at eating garlic knots. That waitress walked by and had to grab a pen and interviewed him on the spot right there sitting at the table last night. That night. That was after he had signed up for Volquest the month before to start looking at Tennessee's recruits before Lane Kiffin was officially hired.
I think he still might have 3 accounts. I hope those never lapse.
I hope they don't. I think he's gotten rid of a couple of them, but he and his wife both had an account to Volquest before he ever stepped foot on this campus to work. But it is interesting in that for the bravado of him, the thing that he's kind of made a roadmap for other coaches out there, Jesse, and it's interesting when you see a new guy get a head job. How does he assemble a staff? Does he take all the money, you know, and then put an okay staff together, or does he kind of be the CEO and let his guys go to work? Look, Tennessee was going to hire Dave Aranda instead of Shoop. That was essentially done. They just didn't get the MOU
They might have recruited
signed.
Jacob Phillips if they had.
Yeah, might have recruited Jacob Phillips. But so he goes and hires Dave Aranda, and then he goes and he takes this Joe Brady guy that nobody knows about and turns it over and lets them. And lets them go to work, and really becomes just kind of a CEO who motivates his players, which is, I think sometimes we get caught up in, all the X's and O's, and does this guy, what kind of staffs he put together. Ed Orgeron's biggest attribute to getting this to this point, they've recruited well, but he surrounded himself with some really good coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I think they go hand in hand. I mean, he learned from some colossal mistakes he made as a first-time head coach at Ole Miss,
which is another point. When you get your second chance, you better learn from it.
Yeah, and really, he arguably had a third chance because there was folks pining for him to get that USC job when he was the interim coach there. But I think LSU has proven to be a much better fit with his personality, the fact that he was able to assemble this staff, and then, with the stuff that the two-headed offensive group is doing, and Dave Aranda. I mean, LSU's always had some of the best athletes in the country, and now they've just seemingly for this one season, and we'll see what happens next year without the trigger man Joe Brady. But for this one season, they seem to have found a cheat code, and were able to really unlock it and just take teams to the woodshed.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see how they evolved. And there's lots of debate, and a couple other things to get to, and then we'll get to Tennessee. But lots of lots of discussion about Joe Burrow, and it's the greatest year for a quarterback. Statistically, it is. I'll ask this question. Was his year better, taking the stats out, was what he did for his team better than what Cam Newton did for Auburn when they won the title?
I mean,
and I know they're two, you probably can't even compare them. It's probably not a fair question because it's two opposite types of play.
Well, the stat that I don't know if it was Cole Kubiak or somebody threw out that that when Cam had his amazing season, that not a single one of the players that either had a reception or a rush ever played a down in the NFL, and they won a national championship. That's pretty insane. Now that defense was loaded with Fairley and some other guys, Cole on that defense, but Burrow. I mean, Jamar Chase is only a sophomore. He'll be a top 10 pick a year from now. Jefferson, though, is already projected to be top 15. Terrence Marshall's really good. Hyde, it seems like a little Darren Sproles. Moss's kid was really – I mean, he has weapons galore out there. And Shadik Charles and some of those guys are really good offensive linemen. So it is a little bit apples and oranges. I would still think – I think the leap that we saw Burrow make this year, I think, is what kind of – adds to that narrative, or kind of the storybook because he did not look like that a year ago. Teased it a little bit, but his footwork and he just has, watching him the last month, such a comfort in the pocket. He got sacked a couple times.
He has a great feel.
He
knows he doesn't dance out of there early. He sort of waits to the last second. I mean, his feel for the game is really, to me, the biggest difference for me. I mean, he throws it the same. His accuracy's always been there. He didn't have a feel for the game a year ago the way he does right now.
Yeah. I thought that second touchdown he threw last night was as pretty a dime as you can lay one in there. I mean, just touch. I mean, you put a little bit too much air on it, that all price sells. If you throw it, with a little bit more of a straight line, it could potentially be batted away or picked off. I mean, that to me, that was one of many throws he's made in the last month that you were just like, man. I mean, like that was just, to me, just a straight dime.
Yeah, it was.
And now he gets to go to the Cincinnati Bengals. Which the only cool part of that for that kid is it literally, for his family, is right down the road from where they live.
Well, he makes $35-40 million getting to do it. So
correct, but I'm just saying, like, for the Bengals, that's like when the Cavs got to draft LeBron. On the other end of the spectrum.
Unless the Bengals decide they want to do something else because they're the Bengals, which is always a possibility. You never know. He's going to get $35 million, and Jefferson got what? 3,500 from OBJ last night on the field after the game.
I'll tell you what, though. I mean, the Bengals should absolutely. because of the sort of season that Burrow had, and even though he will get paid $35 million, the best thing in the NFL right now is having a quarterback on a rookie contract that they could hold a king's ransom for that number one pick. To say, how bad does a team want Joe Burrow, and how many first-round picks can you get? And then you're not exactly getting a poor prize, especially if you think you're going to suck a year from now. Just take Chase Young and then see if you can get Trevor Lawrence the next season. I mean, it's something that I bet will be discussed or at least explored. And Cincinnati, if they're a smart organization, which they have not exactly been proven, they've mostly been proven to be cheap. But it's something they probably should explore.
Well, you're right. And here over the course today, Joe Burrow's great landslide, great pick. He's playing an NFL game and a college game, and in 4 or 5 weeks from now, he's going to have all kinds of flaws. He will be picked to death by every scout out there. It was a system. That's how that deal works. And he'll get picked to death by a lot of people, and all kinds of flaws will be put into his game and everything.
But
else.
his fleas are going to look a hell of a lot better than Herbert's and these other
guys
no
question.
Who are also going to get picked
there's no question he's the best one out there. But that's what they'll do as the number one pick. I got to get to this. Before we get into the Tennessee stuff. What is college football going to do about the targeting rule? Don't we have to address as the game? Don't you have to address that and change how that rule is enforced so that the punishment is not as severe as it is? Look, it didn't affect the game last night. Okay, LSU was going to win, but there was not malicious intent on that play. The same way in the Ohio State game against Clemson. It wasn't a launch. I just think we've got to come up with some kind of tier system.
Yeah, level 1, level 2.
To not punish by taking a guy out of the game when he's just trying to make a football play.
I don't see it getting anything but more severe. I think that's the direction it's heading in. I don't think you're going to see him walk it back.
See, I do. I think you're going to see him walking into a tier system. But then again, how are you going to be able to?
That's so subjective.
Yeah, again.
I don't see him walking back.
But everything they're doing is subjective, though. What's targeting in one game isn't always necessarily ruled targeting in another.
Well, and I'll say that one last night was the right call. Crown of the helmet by the definition of the rule. That's the right call. I just think the punishment seems so severe. And such a game-altering call, when a lot of times there's not.
Was it 28-25
there's not
then?
ill will.
Or was it 35-25?
I think it was 35-25. It was a 10-point game at that point. They weren't going to come back and win. It had a great effect in the Ohio State-Clemson game, without question. I don't know. I think back to you had the SEC championship game where you had the kid from LSU, who had to set out the first half of that deal because I can't think of the linebacker's name on that deal. 2 years, not this year, but previous year, where there's much debate about that. It's such a severe penalty that I don't know. I think that's going to hopefully that will be some sort of off-season topic that we'll look at. But you're in the camp of saying, hey, for safety, they're not going to. I don't
think so. I think they're trying to legislate it. They're trying to legislate it out of the game. Get kids thinking about it. Head injuries, CTE, all that stuff. It's still. That's a huge topic. I agree with you that it should be done, but I just the climate out there. I don't think that it's receptive to change it.
I thought there's a lot of blindside blocks out there. I did not feel like Tease was that bad.
No, I didn't either. At all.
There's a lot of where you're like
he could have killed that kid. And he just kind of shouldered him.
Yeah.
It was his momentum that,
And again,
but they didn't call targeting. That's a defenseless player.
But still, that wasn't.
That's to your point that they're trying to legislate just any
all that
sort
stuff
of
out.
That hits out of the game.
And I thought that the T. Higgins call, I had a lot more problems with that than I did to.
Yeah, when the linebacker from Clemson, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. When he hit him, everybody, you're watching on TV, you're like, that's targeting. It's done. I get it, okay? I just, I'm not sure he intentionally meant to do it, but, by the letter of the law for his safety and everything else, that's the penalty.
And the most violent hit in the game by far was Jacoby Stevens on Amari.
Yeah.
And that was no penalty.
And his poor head, man.
Yeah.
I was worried for that.
Yeah, I mean, that was no penalty. And that was by far the most violent of all three of those plays that we're talking about.
When they slow-moed that, I mean, it looked ugly.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say that there's also a disconnect, and part of the reason I think why there's so much angst and frustration about this is 2 weeks ago you're watching the NFL, and whether there was malicious intent or not, everyone saw Jadeveon Clowney spear Carson Wentz and knock a quarterback out of a playoff game, and there wasn't even a flag.
Right.
Now, the refs said in hindsight they missed that. They probably should have flagged them, but there was nothing. There was,
Right.
So there's a disconnect all the way from the NFL to the targeting stuff in college. It's the sport's in a weird spot right now, and I do think they need to look at it intentionally, this off season and kind of figure out some rules that seem to work.
Yeah, it'll be, and again, I don't know that it'll go anywhere, but I'm sure that will be discussed at some point in time. As we put a bow tie on the season in general, what's your 2 or 3 biggest takeaways from the college football season now that it's over? I'll start. One of my biggest takeaways, I don't think the Pac-12's close, okay? And I don't know that the Big 12's close to being competitive. And I'm not just saying that because of Oklahoma in that game, but I don't think those two conferences are nearly where, everything east of the Mississippi is. When you talk about the Big Ten, you talk about the SEC, and you talk about Clemson. I'm not going to say the ACC, but Clemson. But I think that's one of my big takeaways for all the talk about West Coast stuff. I don't think those guys out there are close to being, kind of where you need to be. So that's one of my major takeaways from this season is that the rich is getting richer, and in the SEC with the new TV deal, it's only going to get richer. And Clemson's going to be back because, again, they're going to play in a conference where they should cakewalk again next year.
Yeah, I mean they're going to be on this and they already are on every early way too early top 25. Clemson's going to be.
But they're disrespected.
One.
Just remember, they're always disrespected.
Exactly.
But, I mean, Clemson, Ohio State. I mean, you say the Big Ten. I'll say Ohio. I mean, just Ohio State and Clemson are just the only 2 programs. I mean, did anybody in the Big Ten come within 2 touchdowns of Ohio State?
Wisconsin
What
had a
was that, the
lead. I
championship game?
don't know what they finished with.
They
were
it
competitive.
was double
in it.
digits. I don't remember. I mean,
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, it was.
Michigan,
it was kind of Ohio State and the rest of the
Michigan
Big
got
Ten.
blown out at Michigan. Yeah. There's a huge gap right now.
What do you think that is? Because those teams have. Oregon's got good athletes. Why do you think there is?
USC
For all the days of talk of parity and everything else, why does it just mean more in the SEC and it works more in the SEC than it does around the rest of the country?
But are we overstating it? That I think every year there's only 5 or 6 teams that can win it anyways. Did that really change?
No, but what it's turned into
point.
though is
right.
it's in most instances it's usually 5 or 6. I'm gonna say there's 4 that are just kind of always there, and then 1 or 2 rotate in and out. And when you look at those teams, every year they've got good quarterback play. Look at the run of quarterbacks that Clemson's on. Look at the run of quarterbacks that Ohio State's on. Alabama's kind of been the opposite of that because they've now had to adjust how they play offense versus what they were winning titles back 8-9 years ago. So and of course LSU makes their run with what they finally turned the corner with Burrow's magical season. So when you can kind of get that run and get that notion, look at Oklahoma. Every year they're putting somebody in the Heisman Trophy in ceremony. To me, it all boils down to that position.
But they're not competitive when they get into play. They were the one game against Georgia, but the other games with a Heisman Trophy candidate, they've not been competitive because those numbers that guys putting up are somewhat hollow because of who he's playing week in and week out.
But right, wrong, or indifferent, they're technically one of the top 4. I'm using the air quotes.
Right, but my point is there's a big gap. There may be one of the top 4, but there's a big gap because that conference to me is a ways off from, anybody in the SEC the same way the Pac-12 is a ways off. Look, Oregon's got a guy who's going to be 2nd quarterback taken in the draft, 3rd quarterback taken in the draft probably,
And the irony is they're probably actually excited to move on from him because I think some of the different things, some of his limitations. Oregon as a team, I could still see cracking in because of the way it all boils down to recruiting. And to me, if you're stacked top 5 classes on top of top 5 classes, you got a pretty darn good shot to compete for one of those 4 spots. And then it's going to be dependent on catching a break or two, and then what's your schedule like. Clemson is going to be able to waltz every year. Ohio State has seen it firsthand that if they lay an egg, like they did at Purdue 2 years ago, they may be screwed because the Big Ten does have some other teams that are quality. Whether it is, Michigan isn't great, but Penn State has been a nice program under Franklin. Wisconsin's been solid. And Notre Dame, I think, is always because of their, they play enough top teams. They play Clemson next year.
Right.
They play enough top teams that if they win 11 or 12 games, they're always going to be in the playoff conversation too.
Yeah. So, it'll be a lot of the same teams talked about next year for the preseason.
Tennessee's on an early top 25 AP.
Yeah.
Number 25.
Number 25 out there for the Volunteers. Momentum for Tennessee. Speaking of Tennessee, Jeremy Pruitt's still looking for a running backs coach. Austin, do we see any movement on the coaching staff in the next week? They go on the road Friday.
I think so. And that would likely be on the defensive side with Rumford Rocker. And then, he's putting Joe Ossovet on the road, which is interesting. Again, I put in the chat, and I believe, Jay Graham is someone that Jeremy really likes a lot, but how these other positions shake out and how much money he has left. Because, let's say Rump leaves. Rump's already making a big chunk of money anyways, but Rump leaves to bring in somebody that's, going to be able to do the job like you want it. You're going to have to pay him. Same thing with... But
you're probably not going to pay your outside linebackers coach $800,000.
Maybe not. You just never know.
He's getting $800,000 because he's got a co-coordinator title on it.
That's right. But let's say, you say you move on from Tracy Rocker, and you want to say hire Bo Davis. That's been the name floated around. Bo Davis is going to command more than $500,000 in my opinion.
Right, I agree. So it's how do you? You have 2 questions. How do you manage your pool, for one, and then what does your pool look like? Is Philip Fulmer giving you a bigger pool?
Well, the other thing is, too, and AP and I talked about this off air yesterday, and I answered this on the GQ late last week, and it was in the thread. But I don't think some Tennessee fans realize that Rocker and Winky's contract actually expires before signing day.
Yeah, before the last visit weekend.
Yeah, so this whole, how close is Jay Hardy and all, something's going to have to happen before January 31st. Either he's going to get a new deal, or Tennessee's going to have a new defensive line coach.
Yeah, because
or they're going to have an opening, and then they're eventually going to get a new defensive line coach.
When D-Beckwith rolls in here on the 1st, those two, and now he's not connected to either one of those coaches, but I'm just saying, he's the one guy that visits that last weekend. Technically they're not under contract when the 1st and 2nd roll around.
Well, right, and who knows if they do something. The university the last 3 or 4 years with contracts have been notorious for doing a deal and then not releasing anything until May. So who's to say somebody doesn't already have a new deal? They just haven't announced it. Now, this situation is different because one deal, a couple of those deals expire and everybody publicly knows that it expires. But I'm with you, Austin. I just think that there's going to be movement in the coming days of some kind. You're either going to come back and say this is who we are, or you're going to start to make some moves.
And then when that happens, the dominoes fall with running backs and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think so. I think until you know exactly how many changes are coming on your staff, you're probably not going to make that running backs coach hire. I still think Montario Hardesty can be a factor with this, along with Jay Graham, and then we'll see where what they elect to do or don't elect to do with Joe Ossovet.
Yeah, obviously putting Ossovet on the road is at least dangling the carrot out there in front of him, all right, here's an opportunity. I still would be. I would still be shocked. I don't. You can't discount Joe, but I do think that they would like to go in a different direction if that's possible.
There's also, in terms of folks jumping to conclusions with Ossovet being on the road. Tennessee only has so many options there. Kevin Simon has taken a step back. He's not doing it. He's not as involved as he was a year ago. So if he's not going to be a guy you put on the road. I'm not sure who else would be the best option. Ostavet has recruited, that
Maryland
area, and who would you put on the road?
When you're throwing a bunch of weight towards Jay Hardy, and Phillip was the one that recruited Kevin Cooper, and Phillip is very well liked by the family.
You've already pulled that card, Phillip Fulmer. How many times? Tennessee can't keep going back to that well.
Why? It's a one-off. Send him out on the road for one visit. Doesn't hurt. I mean, we're not talking about weeks upon weeks.
And we're talking about Phillip Fuller versus Joe Ostavet.
Yeah, and you're talking about also the fact that in the month of January it's not what it used to be. Tennessee's recruiting 3-4 guys, and the rest of the visits are 2021.
So what you're saying is, if you put Fulmer on the road
just for the one day.
And they could do that for the one day.
And then Joe goes out after that because you can interchange them. It's not.
I don't know if you can declare. I'd have to go look at that rule. I don't know if you can rotate that 10th guy all the time like that.
Kentucky's been doing that.
But
Walt Wells went out on the road, and then they had other people going on the road.
But they may have had an exception because the coach has been ill.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that to that rule. My point is, because of what January has become, it's about evaluating 21. It's about getting in a door at a school and looking at 21s and visiting with a coach there and going and turning over some rocks is what the month of January has become, with the exception of, in Tennessee's case, 2-3 kids. But if you can get Phillip Fulmer in the home, yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% that he's going to carry weight with being in that house.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just like that's like having a second in home for the head coach position without it being a second in home.
Provided that the Hardys are big Fulmer fans.
And in my talks, they are.
Yeah.
They feel like the career of Kevin Cooper would have was altered when Phillip got fired.
Gotcha. Okay. We're hearing other names pop up, wide receivers, everything else. I mean, is this still Beckwith and Hardy?
Yeah, in my opinion. I mean, again, if I said this in the chat, if Tennessee's got to decide if they can get with the Weidman kid, do you push Velus Jones into 21 and then take 24 instead of 25?
Because you can do that because he didn't take an official visit.
That's right.
Right. Or you can do the same thing with Cade Mays.
Yeah.
Because he didn't take an official visit. Those two transfers, you could quote blue shirt those guys and count them forward because they didn't an official visit. What we know about this staff is they're going to bring in some guys that they may have no intentions of taking, but they're going to bring in some guys to bring in some guys, right? That's kind of what they do.
Yeah, I mean, the Dylan Spencer kid at Madison Central, I mean, I would expect him to be in here for a visit, and that's on the books. So, I mean, but I don't know if there's going to be room for him. I guess, in a perfect world, like if Beckwith, just fell in love with Florida and Jay Hardy decided not to come, then that changes how they work these two spots. That's why you bring those kids in. That's why, So, I mean, right now I would think, somebody else last night in the chat, is Beckwith a foregone conclusion? I won't say that, but I think he's Tennessee's to lose, in my opinion, because of the cousin, because he's very low key. We talked about this on our podcast last week. It was interesting to me that he's such a basketball guy. Well, it turns out he's going to take these visits. Basically, he'll go late Saturday night, and then he'll be on Sunday, Monday for the next 2 weeks. So when he visits Florida and Kentucky, there'll be Sunday, Monday visits. And then for Tennessee, I do think because there's you have to be off the road or off campus Monday night because of that period, he will actually miss basketball games for that week.
For that last week.
Yep.
So that's going to be how he gets his visits in and avoid missing basketball games Sunday, Monday. That's a pretty good note there. That because I was wondering how he would make that happen and how he would go there. All right, so on the road you can go out Thursday and get in place, but you can't be in the school till Friday, right?
Correct.
That's correct. So Tennessee's going to be around everywhere on Friday because they'll have a couple of guys come in, but it'll be Friday night before they have to get off. So they'll be off the road to come in and recruit. They're also going to have some underclassmen in town in the coming weeks as well. So we'll continue to follow plenty of that and much of that moving forward. Do they get a guy like Brock Vandergriff on campus at some point in time? What about, is it Villeneuve? Christian Villeneuve?
Valou,
the quarterback from up in Maryland, who's originally from Canada. Do they get him on campus? When do they get him on campus? 2 quarterback names to keep a close eye on as Tennessee looks for that quarterback in the class of 2021. All right, let's skip to hoops or jump to hoops. For Tennessee, on the road at Georgia in a tough challenge. Then you go to Vanderbilt. We talked about this on the podcast at the end of last week. We talked about it on the locker room, Rob, on Sunday night with you and I and Austin did. No identity for this basketball team yet. They find a way to win when you got Bowden and Pons going 1 for 24 from the field, which is crazy. What do you make of this team as they go to Georgia?
Just not very good. I mean, with the injuries, with Lamonte being gone, with Plavsic not getting eligible. I mean, they're playing 5 freshmen, 10 minutes a game. Bowden's in the worst slump of his career, and it's just, I mean, they have done well in my opinion to be 2-1, and I'm not trying to be critical, but those 2 wins were what I would imagine will turn out to be 2 of the worst teams in the SEC at the end of the year, and they had to scratch, claw, and fight to get both of them.
Are you seeing, though, a little bit of a change with not in terms of improvement, but is this becoming, Josiah and Santiago's team? Are they becoming more the leaders and not necessarily Jordan with the slump he's in and kind of his personality?
I mean,
too early to say.
I think it's too. I mean, Santiago's played 3 games. I wouldn't go that far. I don't think that Josiah's really aggressive and asserting himself. I mean, again, I think you said it best at the beginning. They don't have an identity to me right now. I mean, they're scrappy. I mean, they showed these last 2 games that they'll fight and give good effort, but they just have such a hard time scoring. And just with Jordan being mired in the slump he is, I mean, they don't have a go-to guy on offense. I mean, I think Rick had always thought that would be Bowden and or Turner, and it's clearly not. I mean, Jordan's just. I mean, I think he's pressing. I mean, I think Rick said that. I think Jordan feels like he's got to go out and produce, and I think that's just has put him in a bad spot. I don't think he's handled the role very well.
So what do they do? Can they get him? What do they do to get him going, or just keep playing?
Just keep playing. I mean, I don't think there's an answer. I mean, Rick pretty much went with the tough love approach after Saturday's game, saying that if Jordan's going to keep playing like that, then I'm going to stop playing him so many minutes. So 8 for 54 in his last 4 games. That's brutal.
Yeah, I mean defensively he's played pretty good defense, but offensively it's obviously been really bad. This is a Georgia team that's got some power to them.
And they can score.
That's
why I think Tennessee will have a hard time at Athens.
Now they've lost 2 straight in the league, but they played Auburn and Kentucky,
the 2 best teams.
The 2 best teams in the league. They did beat Memphis. They've got some other games they played close.
What was the score of that Kentucky game?
They ended up losing by 10 or so.
But weren't they in at the longest time?
Yeah, they were up by 6 at halftime.
They had a hard time stopping dribble penetration, which is, I'm not sure Tennessee can do that to them. But that's where Georgia had a hard time against Kentucky.
I don't think Tennessee has an Ashton Higgins or Emmanuel Quickly on the roster right now.
Quickly has been impressive to start conference play.
He can get it in the paint.
Georgia's scoring right at 80 points a game. I mean, in Tennessee, in league play is averaging less than 60. So, I think Tennessee will make it. They'll defend. They'll play. I think they'll play well. I think it'll be close, but I just don't think they can score enough.
And that's going to be the challenge: is can they find 65 points?
Yeah.
And can they hold somebody to 60 to have a chance to win? I mean, isn't that the game plan?
They haven't scored 70 in a conference game. I mean, they only played 3, but they played 3 teams that a lot of people are going to score on, and I mean. Maybe the Missouri win is a little better than I'm giving credit for after what they did to Florida. But I mean, how in the world do you figure Florida out?
Yeah, I mean they're all over the map.
Bizarre.
I mean they look great one game and then they don't. Then they no show the next game.
Lose by 20 to that team, the Missouri team, the Tennessee.
But that was the Missouri team that played Kentucky really close.
And then loses at home to Tennessee.
Yeah, loses. I mean that's. I mean no offense to him, but that's kind of Conzo Martin in a nutshell. I mean you win a couple games you're not supposed to win, or you play some close, and then you lay an egg somewhere that nobody saw coming, or a game that you should have won, you don't take care of your business. So
I mean, I do think Tennessee wins Saturday at Vanderbilt. I mean, Vanderbilt lost their best player. I mean, lost Naismith for the year. He was averaging 23 a game.
Second year in a row.
And, I mean, their best player by
Their
far.
best player.
I mean, and then they got just routed by Texas A&M, who is not very good on Saturday.
What's that losing streak up to now? 23?
23 or something like that in conference for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, well, 0-18 last year, so it's 21, I guess.
21, I guess.
Well,
I don't know if they had any
They lost
prior
the
to
SEC
that.
tournament, so if you count that one, that's probably 22.
Yeah, I think it's 22. I think that's right. Yeah.
So I mean, I think Tennessee goes 1-1 this week. They'll be 3-2 after 5 SEC games, which doesn't look bad on the surface, but it's been an easy schedule compared to what's going to happen.
Yeah, what it's getting ready to turn into. But we'll see how much these freshmen can grow. I think if you're Rick Barnes, that's what this. You're not throwing the season away, but it's very much how much can Santiago improve, and how much can you get out of Drew Pember as he continues to develop and try to fix some flaws that they have there. I think that's that's the measuring stick for what this team
needs to play him.
Yeah,
Needs to play him.
He's going to have to play him. Whether he wants to or he doesn't, he's going to have to ride through and play. We'll see how he plays that bench on the road in the SEC on Wednesday night and on the road against Vanderbilt on Saturday. That's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com podcast. For Austin Price, Rob Lewis, and Jesse Simonton, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.